Clerk, please read the roll.
Avedisian. Buell. Here. Caban. Camilleri.
Yeah.
DeBella.
Here.
Galligan. Gardeau. Hall.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Hoffman. Holloway. Yono.
Here.
LeBeau. Lester.
Here.
Magnan.
Here.
Murata.
Here.
Osgood. Payne.
Here.
Patel.
Here.
Salemi.
Here.
Solomonides. Sweezy.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Torres.
Here.
Pacino.
Here.
Carrier. We have a quorum.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4, approval of the minutes of the meeting of March the 4th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public comments relative to agenda items? Report from the district chairman? Nothing. Report from the chief executive officer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a lengthy report, and also I would like to have Bob Schwarm report on the successes of building the new IT data center and the backup data center. So given that, I'm going to ask Bob if he would go first, and then that will determine how long my report is. But Bob, I just want to say, I became the CEO in 2015, February 15. With the IT director being vacant for more than 4 years, I hired Bob in May, and I gave Bob a couple of very important goals: to rebuild the IT department, to rebuild the IT data center, and to develop a backup data center somewhere, somehow. And since then, he has done more than all of that. And Bob's going to give us a presentation. He did give us a presentation a couple of years ago on the new data center upstairs. And you cannot appreciate the data center without seeing the old data center. And it's like night and day. So Bob has done a wonderful job rebuilding, not only with technology, but with staffing and positions and cybersecurity. So Bob and his staff, we went up to Springfield last week, and he's going to talk to us about not only building the data center, backup data center in Springfield, but since they built it, they've actually updated it and refreshed it with all new equipment, all in that same time frame. So with that, Bob, I'm going to hand it over to you and Paul. And is Bill here?
Yep.
Bill?
He's hiding behind the podium.
Nice, all right. But it's an amazing, if everyone experienced SAP crashing in 2011, and where we are today, you just can't imagine how we got here. And it's all because of Bob and his staff. So Bob, go right ahead.
So we're going to show a couple of slides that are going to look pretty busy, but Paul's going to talk at a very high level, Paul and Bill. I'm going to try and turn it over without talking a lot today because I actually have a sinus infection that I'm trying to nurse along, and my Sudafed is dying on me right now. So what we're going to take you through is a little bit of a journey that we've had since June 22nd of 2015. When I joined, and then brought on Paul and Bill thereafter. Really what it is it's a road to resilience and a road to high-performance data centers and optimized staffing. We've added 2 data centers since I've gotten here, one that we built within the Hartford facility that you're in right now, and one within the state of Massachusetts data center. The state of Massachusetts and state of Connecticut have a collective agreement for hosting each other. So basically, the state of Connecticut ventured into this arrangement with the state of Massachusetts, and we rode on the coattails of that agreement. Through those, the last 4 years that we've been progressing along this path, we've taken the data center from something that really, as Scott was pointing out, was dilapidated and really, probably would have been shut down by a fire marshal if they had ever inspected it. We built a new data center upstairs, state-of-the-art, has high resilience, high availability. We expanded that to include a Springfield data center that we constructed around a parallel environment so that we could fail over without having to do much transitioning technically and much manual intervention. So Paul is going to talk to you about the automated failover capabilities between the two data centers to ensure our continuity of operations and supporting the organization. And Bill is going to talk about the wide area network and how those circuits are going to provide additional layers of resilience going forward. So, Paul?
Thank you. My name is Paul. I've been with the MDC for 3 years now. I am a business systems analyst, and my role primarily is to support and be part of the data center revolution. I'm going to talk about a little bit about some of the challenges that we faced with our previous deployment. One of the biggest problems we had was that the storage could not keep up with the user requests. So we'd find that people were running jobs. They would have to go get a cup of coffee, come back, check if their job was completed. It was also a much more complex deployment. It cost us a little bit more because of the complexity of the deployment. It had increased power usage, so the carbon footprint was significant. We had to use more cabinet space, and we had more moving parts that were susceptible to failure. So per data center, we had to deploy 8 racks. These are 42U racks. They're about 8 feet high, and they about 15 feet across. So each data center required about 4 of these racks. When we did the new system, we only required 4 racks. So we went from 8 racks to 4 racks. You could see the white spaces in there. That represents empty space. So we were able to reduce the power requirements while also improving on speed. If I would put it visually, we went from 4 of those racks, which are about 8 feet high, to 2 of those little devices, which are about the size of my hand, kind of expanded. The power consumption reduction is about 90%. The performance improvement is about 10 times, and the space reduction rack-wise is about 50%. This new environment, not only does it provide improved performance, but it simplifies the deployment. It's more cost-effective. As I said before, it has decreased our power consumption. We use less cabinets. Upgrades are less disruptive, and it's also modular. That means that if we need to expand this environment, we add pieces to it instead of doing what we called forklift upgrades, which required moving physical racks in and out of the data center. We're also able to monitor this environment using our cell phones, mobile devices, and via the cloud. So we could be sitting at home and we'd still be able to see what's going on in the data center. I'll invite Bill to talk about the network redundancy.
Hi, I'm Bill Pallas. I'm the manager of the infrastructure group. So Paul and I have been working on this infrastructure for the last year. We made the decision to move away from VBlock into the Pure environment. This slide right here basically just gives you a visual of the connection between the Hartford and Springfield data center. There's a whole lot of plumbing that goes on in between the two data centers that allow the systems to work seamlessly between the two locations. To put it simply, the Hartford data center doesn't realize that it's separated from the Springfield data center, and the Springfield data center doesn't realize it's separated from Hartford. All these systems communicate and write to each other synchronously. So our job now is to make sure that we can get the remote locations where all the work is happening back into the data center. So our first phase, when we did arrive here, the wide area network connectivity, for the most part, had two circuits going into each critical location, 240, 231, 125, all back to the primary data center. We do have redundancy in this environment where if we had a WAN failure, a network failure on our primary or redundant side, all the remote sites still have connectivity back into the Hartford data center. With the new Pure Array and its synchronous connectivity into the Springfield data center, we could sustain a WAN failure and a system failure in Hartford, and it would be transparent to the user. Wouldn't feel any slowdown, wouldn't experience any outage. The remaining risk that we have today is a complete failure of the Hartford data center. If 555 Main Street were completely without power, at that point, what would happen is the replication of the Springfield data center would be secure, the data would be secure, but the remote access from each one of the locations would be inaccessible. So our data is protected, but at this point, the workday would come to a halt. Where we are today, we've introduced a physical redundant WAN. This is by bringing in a remote hub where we're going to pipe the remote locations into the West Hartford filter location, and then one big pipe going back into the Springfield data center. And we're migrating the legacy sites that are coming end of contract. So the phased approach is based upon the cost of removing old circuits and implementing the new wide area network. So as we're transitioning, we'll have 3 different clouds, which would be the legacy redundant, the primary WAN, and then the new physical redundant cloud. By the second quarter, end of second quarter this year, we'll have half of the locations as they come to end of contract with one of our carriers migrated into this alternate WAN hub. So half of the sites, and most of them critical locations, will have redundant connectivity back into Springfield, give us the ability to withstand a complete Hartford failure. Future capabilities coming from this infrastructure make us cloud ready. It doesn't connect us or tie us down into the Springfield data center. If we wanted to go to the cloud, we could go to the cloud with a single circuit move. It makes for a more modular approach to providing connectivity into our critical resources.
So as a testimonial, we did get feedback from our users after we moved into the new infrastructure. And one of the most significant one was the SAP system that we use, which is our most critical application. Typically, it would take us 8 days, and we would have to take an 8-hour outage to clone that system. It now takes us 8 minutes with no outage. So it's quite a significant performance boost, and our users are already seeing the benefits. Thank you.
And if any of you were here in 2011, when the data system went down, we in a sense lost the data. And we might have stored the data, but there was no way in which the system was developed so that we could download the data easily and upload it back into SAP. And as what Bob and his staff, Paul and Bill have said, is that now that we can operate from Springfield, and the next steps are the field locations. But just an amazing turnaround from where we were in 2011 through 2014, 15. So, Bob, great job.
If you have any questions, please.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry,
Sorry, just a question about here at the headquarters at Main Street. Have we ever really lost power here?
We
Completely?
lost,
Just this
lost
week.
power just last week, this past week.
The whole building?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's not, it's rare in Hartford, obviously, because the power's underground. So it's very rare, but it does happen.
There was a failure in the
Well,
system.
that was all of downtown
Right.
that affected,
Yeah.
but how often did that happen? I mean,
I
know
can
it-
count in 12 years, 13 years I've been here, probably happening 3 times in my career here. So it happens, but as you remember, I was in college, Hurricane Gloria, Hartford didn't lose power.
Well, Hartford didn't lose power in any of the big, the ice storm or any of the big parts. Downtown
Right.
Hartford doesn't lose power because the plant's connected all the way underground, but that was a transformer failure or something that happened over here. But how important is it really? I mean, if, and I don't mean to diminish it at all, I'm just saying, how important is it? If the backup is there, and the expectation is that if we lost power here, it wouldn't be for all that long anyways, so, but does it do any kind of long-term damage to it, if the power is gone here at the headquarters, or that everything's saved and it's not, doesn't change, or?
Correct. We have full backups at both locations, at the data center in Springfield and here. We have them at both locations for speed of recovery if we need to. The biggest risk that we run right now is actually not the power itself. We've got ample backup power from a generator, from a UPS. The problem is the circuits. If the circuits go down or the circuits go without, fiber optic light, we'll be out of commission, and the 14 sites that connect to us will be as well.
But you, as you said, though, you don't lose anything that you were doing. I mean, it's all still there.
No,
It's just a question of getting
transactional
it-
data, Commissioner, it will synchronize only to a certain point of accuracy within a certain number of seconds. So you would lose some transactional data that were happening at the point of failure.
You'd have to do a pretty detailed cost-benefit analysis if you wanted to put real uninterruptible power here that
They
could
have to
last
go
for a
to
time.
N4.
Doesn't seem like it's really critical anyway, so.
What would you have to go to, N4 or 5 to
So-
get that kind of backup?
And N2, which is Six Sigma, 5 nines.
Commissioner?
So what you're saying is that at this point right now, if headquarters went down, the 14 connections would be down. But when you were illustrating, or Paul was illustrating the cloud additions, are you then saying if headquarters went down, the 14 connections would still be functioning?
Correct. At the end of our transformation with the wide area network cloud, we'll be capable of recovering, not just recovering, but basically being resilient between the 2 data centers, all 14 sites.
Commissioner?
Have you had any disaster recovery backup tests yet?
We recover all the time, actually. We have to recover systems, we have to recover some files on occasion, and sometimes we have to recover network elements as well.
Well, I'm not talking about restores, but like actual disaster recovery.
So we haven't done a full recovery event. We have moved most of our entire data center load to Springfield and operated out of there. So we do know that we can function out of that data center without impact. What we haven't done is we haven't failed the entire circuitry of the main data center because we're not ready for that yet.
Okay.
Anybody else? On the cloud, that retains the information. That's recoverable.
So what Bill
And
was
that's what you're
illustrating.
And you haven't hooked that up. That isn't,
So what Bill is illustrating was the wide area network cloud, the circuit cloud.
Right.
There's also the data center
Center
cloud.
cloud.
Right. So the data center cloud is what we're prepared for when When Bill completes his efforts with the wide area network, we'll literally be able to change the circuit to point to a cloud service and do away with the data center in Springfield if we want. So that makes the data center transformation very modular to future-based technologies.
Rich?
In 2011, I think we had a remote in West Hartford.
Yeah,
and
it
I
didn't-
heard
didn't
West Hartford
exist.
mention I know, I want to bring that up. But I heard you mention West Hartford. There's still remote in West Hartford?
Correct. So West Hartford, what we did was we took the data center that, well, and I use that term very, very loosely. It was a closet that the door was propped open and a fan was pointed at the systems that was in the doorway. So again, probably a scenario that OSHA would have intervened and shut you down. So we took that closet, we retrofit it with specific environmental controls like air conditioning, electricity from the generator, and we've created that now into a master distribution frame for our second hub for the district. So we needed a second site, and we needed one that was prepared and ready for significant access change. And because West Hartford is right off of Farmington Ave, we were able to get the right circuits in there quickly. So today we have 4 sites that are active on that secondary cloud.
Further questions? Thanks, Bob. Good job.
Yeah, good job, Paul and Bill. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just skim through my report, try and hit the highlights, and if there's any questions, Commissioners be more than happy to answer. As some of you may know, there was an article in the paper recently, this past week, that the town manager, Mike Maniscalco, from East Hampton, is actually going to South Windsor, which is one of our non-member towns, and the town manager, who is our commissioner, is retiring. So we welcome Mike to a non-member town. He had, in his parting, he had sent out a request for MDC, Aquarion, and Connecticut Water to submit proposals for developing their water systems, because the plan utilizing Portland as a non-member town and the funding, the grant and loans, was not included as part of the governor's budget. So unfortunately, East Hampton is on their own. I do not recommend submitting a proposal. There's no efficiencies for the MDC to run and manage a water utility that's that far out of our resources. The only benefit to the MDC in Portland and East Hampton would have been through our proposal, which was a 7-mile water main to connect East Hampton to Portland. In terms of, I have been part of a utility management program at Southern Connecticut State University, and they're trying to develop a program for a utility engineering management, a business type degree. And the most important part of that is discussion is the MDC. I'm going to my NACMA meetings tomorrow, but even in talking with the professors at Gateway Community College and Southern Connecticut, the MDC is far is above and beyond leading the industry in training its future workforce. Our Learn to Earn program, our intern program. When I mentioned the amount of funding that we invest in our intern program and our Learn to Earn program to people across the country, including Southern Connecticut, no one is doing that. No one is. We hire upwards of 40 interns a year, trying to educate them on the water industry and the potential for a career in the water industry. And our Learn to Earn program is the same. So we do have, and we have noticed out the Learn to Earn program, and it was sent out today. We sent it out. We send it out typically. We like to have one point of contact to the town school superintendents, but typically we do hear directly from the schools within the communities themselves. And again, applications are due by 5/1. Program will run from July 8th to August 1st. Approximately 12 students from our 8-member towns. And as we did last year, if we don't get 8 from our member, 12 students from our member towns, then we go to our non-member towns as well. And then I would like to have a further discussion, and we will be talking with Commissioner Magnan on developing a subcommittee for the Speakers Bureau under the Community Affairs. So we're going to talk about that with John Myrtle and the chairman, and develop that program for everyone's review. I would like to say this is a great step by a lot of people at the MDC. We've been talking about it for a while, about the Operation Fuel and an ability for people to donate money on their water bill. So we are in the process of work. We've a lot of our electronic bill pays and all those kinds of programs. We have been utilizing a select group of MDC staff that happen to work and also live in the district, and using them as a pilot program, anywhere from 10 to 15 staff, so to make sure we can work out all the kinks and the bugs in the program. So we are starting a pilot program with our staff, which will allow you to donate $1, $5, or $10. And so we'll be working on that for the next couple of months, just to make sure we've got everything in place before we go live with our groups. Running out of time. Okay, the really important, I've talked about this in the past. Carrie Martin sent out a letter that I had sent to EPA. I think it was Friday we sent it out. And this is just to simply inform EPA. And as we remember, the tunnel contract that we're building, Contract 2, we initially started out with, that was designed as a one project, which was approximately $600 million, which included the tunnels. It included the consolidation tunnels that would bring the overflows to the tunnel, and obviously a pump station to lift the CSO or SSOs out of the tunnel into the plant. We had agreed in 2016, DEEP had requested us that we break those contracts up into smaller contracts because they have the same problem that we have. It's a cash flow issue. They only have so much cash, and they need to be able to pay the bills and reimburse municipalities across the state. And their concern was that if they gave us one contract, one requisition could be, you know, we have $5 million requisitions on these projects. You could have a $20 million requisition payment to the contractor, and it could wipe out the cash for the day, week, or month of the state. So we didn't want to create that problem. So we understood that, and we agreed with that. With the exception, we were concerned that the grant and loan components that we thought we were going to get and expected to get for the one project, that if we got the agreement in place, then we would be guaranteed that grant and loan for the entire $600 million contract. DEEP could not and would not give us that authorization for all. We broke it up into 5 contracts. They would not give us that commitment and could not commit the state over that long a period of time. And so therefore, the only grant and loan that we received was for the tunnel itself, which was just under $300 million. And so now the concern we have is contract 3, 4, and 5, the pump station and the 2 consolidation tunnels. Those, we're ready to bid those. Contract 5 is a contract in the West Hartford area to pick up the CSOs. Our expectation is when we received confirmation, the state is going to give us 42% grant, which represents about $13 million for that contract alone. The state only has 8. There is no bond. We were supposed to bid the contract in February. There's been no bond commission hearing in February, none in March, and will be none in April. So I sent the letter so that we can make EPA aware that that contract is going to have to be delayed. Otherwise, if we move forward with this contract without that funding agreement in place, we will basically void any potential to get that $13 million grant. So within the 3 contracts that are left for the tunnel, 3, 4, and 5, that represents about 130 some odd million dollars, and it represents about 70 some odd million dollars in grant. And as I've said at the last meeting, if we don't receive that grant money for those 3 contracts, our special sewer service charge today is $4.10. Our expectation, we've been going up about 50 cents a year. Our expectation is that special sewer service charge will be $4.60 next year. If we don't get the grant and loans, it's $6.60. So that's more than a 60% increase in 1 year. So that's a major, major issue for us. I'm not suggesting that the state isn't doing everything they can in terms of DEEP to get us that money, but it is a reality that we have to concern ourselves with. So we have notified EPA of that issue, and we're hoping that there is a bond commission hearing for May.
Questions?
Yeah, you want
Go ahead.
questions on that?
Yeah. So Scott, I'm assuming that, we can't execute a contract unless all the money's in place, so first. But beyond that, would there be any point in putting it out to bid unless we're sure? Because, the bid's going to get stale after a certain amount of time anyways.
Right.
So.
Yeah, as you know, Commissioner.
Money's in place before we put it out to bid, or what?
Yeah, so, Commissioner, in the construction world, when you bid a project, you should have the funding in place, right? That's an absolute requirement. We could bid the project. The problem is that if we don't get the money, and we don't get what we expect, and we decide not to award the contract, most of these contractors are investing anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, in some cases $1 million. On the tunnel, they probably invested $1 million in actually developing their bid. And it's not good practice to ask someone to give you a bid when you don't know if you can actually award it. So we're not going to bid that. We're going to hopefully, the concern we have, EPA could tell us, you have to bid it anyways. You've got to move forward with or without the grant loan. We don't care. Build the project. They've been very reasonable on some of the projects where we've had to delay for those kinds of reasons, a month or two. So we're hoping that they will be recognized. It's out of our control, and it is in the best interest of our customer base to wait for this grant monies. But the state of Connecticut has very strict rules where you can, if you proceed without the funding agreement signed, or their approval to go to bid, then you're going to waive any chance of any grants. So we don't want to put ourselves in that position.
Further questions? Commissioner?
With the involvement of the EPA, are there any federal dollars that are available?
When it comes to the state clean water funds, the revenue bonds, and the loan program, there's actually very little funding from the federal government. There's actually more funding on the water side through the clean water funding for DPH. They get much more funding from the federal government than the clean water funding gets from.
Just as a point of not clarification, but information, up until 1978, we used to receive 80% from the federal government and 20% from the state, from our local share. That terminated in 78, and the federal government hasn't been in the sewer business since then in a big way, or even a small way. That's one of the reasons.
Infrastructure.
That's one of the real pressures we have us honest with regard to infrastructure in general. Everybody thinks infrastructure is just highways, roads, and bridges. It's also subterranean. It's water, sewer.
The levees out west right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Commissioner?
Do we have long-term and short-term impact of these delays? And if time comes that we have to come up with our own money, do we have alternative plans to go forward?
We do. So the Clean Water Fund, our Clean Water Surcharge Fund, we could utilize that to pay for the project without the grants. The problem is we'd have to raise the rate on everyone within 1 year by 60% to do that, and that's not what we want to do.
How long can we wait for state to come up with no or maybe?
That's a good question. I think the answer to that is EPA will decide that, and the State of Connecticut Bonding Commission will decide that. So we'll have to wait and see if there's something in May. If there's nothing in May, I am planning to go up to Boston in mid-April to talk to them about this very topic. We raised this issue with them back in 2016 when we were dealing with, we brought to the commission here this very issue, our very concern, and we raised to the board, we have two options. Either we move forward with contract 2 without the commitment for contracts 3, 4, and 5, or we not proceed. And the decision and our recommendation, staff's recommendation, was we proceed with the goodwill letter that we had from the state. So we did that. But this was our fear that we were concerned with.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yep,
Commissioner?
yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. My question for you is that the EPA could decide basically to press the issue with us, in other words, force us to move ahead.
Yes.
And I guess my concern would be Deer Island, where basically they did just that up in the Boston area. And what they did basically is that they went to court, and every year the judge would talk to consultants, and they would decide basically what was going to be done for the year. They did the work. Then the judge would sit down, look at the people who were members of the MDC there, and they divide up the bill and then send it out. You didn't have any choice. That's the way they did it. So I guess my concern is I think we have to be very careful that we don't find ourselves being boxed in. And I think that we need to make sure that people understand clearly what's happening here, because if the state decides that it's not going to bond, and the EPA decides that they're just going to force us basically to press ahead with this project, we're going to be faced with the possibility that we're going to have to say to our customers in the district, here's the bill. And that's going to be disastrous.
And the other fact, Commissioner, you're absolutely right. And we still need a third referendum to complete the Clean Water Project. So it's in the state's best interest. It's in the MDC and our town's best interest that we get this grant, because if we don't get the grant and we are forced to proceed with the project and we increase the rates by 60% in 2020, it'll make it almost impossible for a third referendum to pass. And the state doesn't want that. I know DEP doesn't want that. So that's something that the state has to consider. And we're, like I said in my letters to them, I've addressed those kinds of issues.
And those issues could really get complicated. Obviously, we aren't a sovereign.
Yeah.
We have the right to go bankrupt, and that would be another consideration. So there's a whole lot of issues here. We don't want to jump to any conclusions, but it's an assessment we'll have to make as we move down the road. Buddy?
Yeah, just, Al, I really appreciate your comments on that. What I always try to keep in mind, and we do at the Board of Finance, is we only have one place to go, and that's to our customers. There's only 110,000 of them. You gave the example of Deer Island and Boston. There's more people in Boston than there are in all of Rhode Island. So you can spread the cost out a little more. We have 110,000 customers, about 110,000 customers.
102 actually now.
Yeah, 102. That's it. So the cost is going to get spread out across those customers if we leave it on the water bill, which is why we got to think about putting it somewhere else to try to spread the cost out farther beyond those 102,000 customers. But you're right. If they came back with a direction from EPA to say, you got to go ahead. And by the way, the pump station, is this the main pump station for
Yes.
the tunnel? So we could finish the tunnel. It's not going to work unless we build the pump station.
Correct.
It's just going to be a useless hole in the ground.
Right.
Unless there's a pump station there. So, and that's got to have, the schedule for that's got to be coordinated with when we finish the tunnel. So we got to get answers on this. And that's not a good answer, as you said, Scott, to say we're going to spread it around with the 102,000 customers, because it's not likely that the next referendum is going to pass if we do that. So.
Right.
So you're in the same position.
Mr. Chairman, for the worst scenario, we have to start now educating people what the issues are and what is controlling these issues, so that they don't tell all rest of us all sitting here that you made a stupid decision to start with that big project and when you did not have the money. So we need to start strategizing how we give the bad news when needs to be done.
Correct.
Rich?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, I'm sure it's being conveyed to the state. This isn't an issue for 102,000 customers of MDC. It's an issue for the state of Connecticut. We're talking about the Connecticut River. We're talking about Long Island Sound. And we just recently were accredited in saving nitrogen disposal in Connecticut River just recently. I think that came
Yep.
to fruition. But I think we shouldn't be talking just the 102,000 customers. It's this whole state of Connecticut. So I hope that the state and their bond commission understand that, and we transmit something to them that explains that to them.
We will.
We're one of many in the line.
Just somewhat in support of what Commissioner Patel said, if you're going to communicate to the public in general, and you're going to communicate to our customers especially, in order to do it correctly, to have some of the desired effect, you're going to have to name names. Name commissions and agencies, chairman, directors of those, and that makes it awkward, makes it maybe embarrassing, but I think if you're not going to do at least that, there's no point in doing it, because otherwise it's kind of like a white paper that has no ink on it. So I would suggest that if we're going to do this, and I think we should, educate and prepare, and make the public and our customers aware that at least we should draft something and have it prepared and ready to go, because otherwise, they'll burn us down.
We will do that, Commissioner. And, there's two fights here. There's a EPA issue, federal issue with the SSOs. And the three contracts left are Contract 3, which is the pump station, which is required for both the CSO and the SSO community. And Contract 5 is for West Hartford, the SSO, Newington, the SSO portion. But without Contract 4, you cannot eliminate the overflows to the Weathersfield Cove. So that is where the fight is going to be in the state of Connecticut. It's going to be about, listen, if we don't have the grant and loan that we expected to have, we're not going to eliminate the overflows to the Weathersfield Cove. It's that simple. So that's got to be our push on the state side, at least, enforce the issue with the clean water funding.
Further questions? Gary?
Just to continue on this, Mr. Chairman, it would seem that this would be we can preclude this discussion if we can get the money, obviously. And it would seem that this would be an appropriate point to be talking to our legislators from all of our towns. That, I mean, that's who we have to represent our towns, our citizens, our 102,000 customers, and to a large degree, the state of Connecticut, to be pushing for this at this time. Now, I know the governor has, declared, what did he say, a thin
No, a diet.
agenda, or a diet, close. I was on the right ballpark, wrong field. But we're in a diet, but there are certain things that can't be dieted. There are certain things that have to go forward. There are certain fundamental and important projects that need to be done, and this would seem to fall into that category, that they have essentially committed to in the past. And we need the state to come through on this. And again, that's the legislators, and I don't know how we can get them involved, but I think that's part of the discussion.
We will have that discussion, too.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
I don't think it's as alarming. I think in May, he's going to hold a bond, whether it's May or June, the money's going to be approved. DEP's committed it to us. I mean, I don't mind going to all our state reps and, and telling them, put pressure on it, but I don't believe they would ever not give us this money. It's been committed, it's coming, it's just that his diet has, slowed things up, the word you used.
Well, Commissioner, just to be clear,
I
they
think-
haven't committed, they've,
Hasn't committed a year ago for this
they,
money.
what they did do,
I think what they did was, to protect themselves, is they made it very clear that they couldn't guarantee.
Yes.
They could not?
No.
They could not guarantee those, but in good faith, they would move forward, but,
there's a process internally, which they identify projects as priority projects. My
The
problem,
amount of lobbyists, Scott, we have, the amount of state reps and state senators that are in our district, then maybe we ought to be getting every lobbyist, Mr. Stone, working on this and making sure it does pass. And whatever pressure we have to put on the bond commission, then we should do it, and if it costs us some money, we ought to do it. Because to go from $4-something to $6, or a 60% increase, you will never get another thing passed, and you might as well have security guards for every one of us. Because a monthly bill, people complaining now, you wait and see how much they complain.
right.
further discussion? Go ahead.
Okay, real quickly, we did schedule, we talked about this at the Water Bureau, we did schedule the Hogback Commission meeting for 4/11, and Commissioner Buell has been appointed, and we are updating him on the issues.
We're reporting him tonight.
Sorry. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Groundwater discharge bill from Deep. I did receive a letter from Deep, and I know that our district council has talked directly to the governor's council. I received a letter on March 22nd, 2019, which basically says very nicely that Deep's basic logic of what they think they owe us is we have a groundwater charge which was amended this year, which Pratt & Whitney is paying, and it's by gallon. They don't believe they should have to pay by gallon. They feel that they should be paying the sewer usage charge that we charge all nonprofits, which is a quote equivalent to ad valorem, so a church, any schools, those kinds of things. So they feel that they should be charged this utilizing the sewer usage charge per CCF for the amount of water they discharge to the sewer system. Even if we use their logic, they're not paying the right rate. They haven't ever paid the right rate, and now that we've changed the sewer usage charge, they don't feel that they are going to pay that rate based on their logic, or the rate per gallonage until, quote, this issue is resolved. So District Council is working with the AG's office,
With the governor's.
and with the governor's office, and it's, at
Governor's
this
lawyer.
point, it's, yes, I don't know what else we can do except the inevitable of,
The obvious issue, if that's the feeling, I mean, then they should find someone else that will charge that rate.
Paid a year ago.
We had made the offer to the state to try to resolve this landfill issue going forward at the very least. And this commission went a long way towards trying to resolve this matter going forward when you provided for the three-tier charges, fees, different fee schedule for this groundwater discharge back in your budget for 2019. We just received this letter. Attempts have been made, meetings have been had, meetings with the chief of staff of the governor, meeting with the AG's office. We just received this letter last week from DEEP and a letter from the AG's office as to what their position is. It basically remains unchanged. We have retained outside counsel to pursue litigation if necessary, and it appears to me, to us, that that may be necessary at this point. We haven't met internally on these letters yet, but it's something we need to really think long and hard about, because it's just not going anywhere, at least to date, trying to negotiate a resolution with this,
Chairman?
despite your efforts, quite frankly.
Which we have anticipated relative to legal opinion and legal action on the injunctive action. We'd have to bring an injunctive action first, and then see where that goes.
Chairman, so is it still a possibility that one of our actions would be to physically turn off the valve and prevent them from discharging? Would that be one of the
That would be,
solutions?
One of the options.
looking at the injunctive action that the chairman alluded to, that would be the relief we would seek, is to stop it now.
Yeah.
There's a collection action, which is what's owed, and then there's the injunction action preventing from continuing the bleeding, so to speak, continuing the discharge. And it would be that injunctive action that we bring first, and then the collection action. But we have an action that's pending with the Claims Commissioner for the state of Connecticut. We're waiting to have a decision from her on motions that have been filed on that issue. That goes back some ways. But moving forward, the idea is to stop the discharge through an injunctive action and then proceed to collect what's owed.
Disconnecting the pipe would adversely affect Hartford area, and particularly Hartford land.
There was some thought of taking unilateral action to do just that.
Right.
And we decided that in the abundance of caution and because of the potential harm
Right.
to residents,
Go with the
to
injunctive.
customers, to the environment, that the better course would be to seek judicial relief. And I'm sure that the court would take that into consideration. What's the effect if you were to shut them down immediately, and perhaps give them time to arrive at an alternative before doing that. But we'd want the blessing of the court before we did anything, so that was the idea behind that.
Thank you.
just to be clear though, technically, what they're discharging to our sewer
Some water.
is water that they don't want to mix with groundwater. Practically, it's mixing with groundwater because the way in which how much they discharge is based on the elevation of the river. So what they're trying to do is mitigate the impacts of the leaching of the leachate within the landfill into it's physically connected. There's no barrier between the natural elevation of water in the ground with what's leaching. So all they do is simply monitor based on elevation, and when the elevation gets to a certain point, they discharge that water. So if we didn't accept that water into our sewer system, that leachate would be mixing with the groundwater. I don't believe there'd be any impact whatsoever to the local resident or the local business. It's all about the leachate mixing with the groundwater and then going into the river. So, but the practical side is, it's already happening. The leachate, you know, it's like a drop of salt. You put a drop of salt in a cup, it's gonna dissolve and disperse equally in equal parts throughout the entire cup. The same thing's happening with the landfill. They're catching some of it, but they're not catching all of it. And I know that the state was doing testing, and it probably does regular testing in the Connecticut River. But the answer is, we're not gonna surcharge a resident or a business if we stop them discharging this groundwater to our system.
If that's the case, then we will weaken our case at the courts, because they will not be as much concerned for that reason.
Well, they've got other ways of disposing of it. That's the basic issue.
How do you force that issue?
Buddy, you had an...
Yeah, when we
then
first
Ray.
talked about doing this, I think the advice from district council was, Bart Halloran, was that, we don't want to be the cause of an environmental problem. And so we'd have to prove, I think, before we turned it off, that we wouldn't be. And Scott says that there's science that says that, we wouldn't be making it any worse than it is now. But I think we'd have to be able to say that before we could just turn it off. I mean, and just say, well, we don't think it's going to cause a problem. I think, and we've shown that the problems that we've already had when there are serious, rainstorms, that this is going through Hartford's combined sewer system, and the combined sewer overflows are dumping it into the Connecticut River now. I don't know if we've ever measured how much, but so either way, we got a problem with it, but I do think that we'd have to make sure we weren't making it any worse before we turned it off, and that's more or less what Bart said to us in the beginning. So.
Well, also, I think the injunctive action is giving them the ability to go and find someone else who
remediate it on their own. Yeah.
Remediate it also, and that's really the issue. I mean, they can put it in tanker trucks like everybody else does, and bring it to Springfield if they don't want to come to us. It creates a risk when it's in that sewer.
Or they could build their own treatment. They could build their own
treatment facility.
Right there at the facilities.
Right. Ray?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you just said, Bill. You give them 30 days notice. They can build a storage tank, Dominic. We went over these numbers before, and it's 80,000 gallons approximately a day? Okay, the big tankers hold 8 to 10,000 gallons. That's only 8 to 10 trucks a day, but have a storage tank there. And they can run, they have 3 trucks. You only got to run 3 loads apiece in the water. You can bring it to Metabassett, you can bring it to Springfield, bring it wherever you want. And you give them 30 days, you're not putting it on the ground. You can bring it to Hartford, like the 6 million revenue we make now, we'll make, pay us. But
we aren't going to continue.
To do it. The state can decide, and you're right, if they want to build their own plant there, which I think they did, I don't know if it was Chris, one of you, or Sue, told us, they did set up something up there and tested it. They were gonna, that's an option. There can be a lot of options, but
They
give
tested
them, you guys will have to decide. Give them a time period.
The state of Connecticut
I
cannot decide if they don't want to pay the electric bill, right?
Right.
You don't pay the electric bill, they shut your lights
Right.
off.
Bingo.
Yeah, we've already,
Bingo.
Right,
yeah.
Alan, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I just want to clarify a couple things. We have been through this conversation almost a year ago, as I recall, perhaps it's longer. Each time we've had the conversation, we've heard that our attorneys are looking at it, and I don't dispute that or doubt their ability to move it along. But the bottom line is, this body decided clearly to take action in a very immediate way, whether it was 30 days or whatever we had decided. But the point is, the body decided that this was a serious problem. We go to the state, whether it's DEP, the governor's office, or whomever, we make the case. They don't recognize that this is a serious problem.
we need to take action or convince the court quickly that this is a potentially serious problem. And I'm sick and tired of having the same discussion and hearing about, well, the governor's office wants us to wait, DEP wants us to wait, they need another 3 weeks to test the whatever. It just gets to be a ridiculous argument. So whatever action we can take in a more immediate way, I would suggest that we take it. I'm not suggesting that it's this action or that action. I'll take the recommendation of the staff.
Well,
but we need to do
moved
something.
forward on two tracks. One is that you've just described, Commissioner. The other is to authorize the attorneys that we've hired to prepare the paperwork necessary to file it, and that's done, and that's ready to be filed.
We've anticipated this issue, so it's not an issue where we've got to ask attorneys to go forward and structure a litigation or a case or whatever we're going to do, an injunctive action. That's been done. It's just a question now. And again, we entered into an agreement with the UTC of Pratt & Whitney.
And we got it resolved.
And we resolved it, and there was a compromise. We compromised our position. Their attitude is they just don't want to pay. So I think it's becoming pretty obvious that if that's the action, then we've got to proceed in our action. There's no sense in us keep doing it in the event we don't get paid for it. You know, we probably won't get, whether we can litigate to recover what's owed to us is another issue, but when do we draw the line and say, okay, go someplace else? Someone else will take it for me, I assume.
Well, we may need to do a better job at bringing it to the public
Well,
and making it in a decision in the court of public opinion.
yeah, I think we've got to come to a point of agreement or disagreement with the administration, and then we'll proceed down the other.
It seems like my job tonight is to segue off of the commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. I wonder if our ratepayers understand how much money DEEP owes them and what the effects have been on the sewer charge as part of the water bill. $6 million is a lot of money. And from what I understand from when I joined the commission or the board 2 years ago, that DEEP
to
has
10.
failed to adhere to its own rules and has consistently changed the narrative to avoid paying one charge or another that's arrived at, by suggestion. And so I agree with Commissioner Hoffman, this is getting long in the tooth. And I understand what the legal side is doing, and I appreciate that. And it's got to run its course, but the course has got to end.
Letter from last week, it ran its course. We received definitive statement from the AG's office, their lawyers, the state's lawyers, that they're not interested in the compromise that we've offered through the rate change. They wanted time for the new administration to understand the issue and be vetted on the issue, et cetera. That time's up. That letter was received, and I think it's time we move on. So it's ready to go, and we'll speak with the chairman and others and
No, I don't want to make sure this doesn't get confused with the issue that we had just before, where we're talking about water customers paying. This one's not on the water customers.
No.
This one's on the ad valorem, on the towns.
Oh,
So-
thank you.
So the towns have been the ones that have reacted to us increasing the ad valorem, so they have to add it to each, annual, tax, and it becomes another tax increase for them. Last year, we were sort of, Scott, you can explain this, but last year, we were sort of saved by the bell by Pratt & Whitney actually agreeing, we did have a compromise with them, but they were able to put some, enough of funding in to pay for, on their end, that the increase more or less disappeared, almost anyways, that DEEP's, whatever charges were in arrears with DEEP, that this sort of cleared it up, but only because, Pratt & Whitney started paying the thing. The continuous, problem with them not paying is going to go right back on the towns again. The amount's going to go back on the towns are going to wind up paying it through the ad valorem. But I do want to, say that, I don't think that there's an option of us just turning it off. I mean, if we could have done that, we would have done it, the last September 1st, or whatever it was, when we said we were going to do it. So I don't, it's not so obvious that we could do that. And try to imagine, you know, if, like, as you said, if the city of Hartford didn't pay its electric bill to Eversource, would they really turn off the power to the city of Hartford? I think something else would happen in between. They're not going to turn off the power to the city of Hartford. It's just, you know, it's not just unimaginable. It's not going to happen. Something else is going to happen before that. But with this, you know, as you said, there's nobody that's going to get, there's not going to be a really big impact. There'd be a big impact if Eversource turned off the power to the city of Hartford. It's not going to happen. But what's the big impact of us doing this? What's the big impact? I mean, if they can live with it, you said in a way they can live with it somehow, you know.
The impact, the physical impact is as the rains, as it rains and the water level rises in the river, they're afraid of that elevation and water mixing with the leachate. So what will happen is, without discharging that water, it will mix and it will further contaminate the river. But it's contaminating the river now. So it's not like there's a, it's more or less is the issue. It's
incremental. It just,
Right.
it'll get worse and, or whatever. But, and it's basically the Connecticut River that we're trying to clean up with the Clean Water Project, you know, and, you know, so they have to come to some solution at some point. But I think.
Their solution seems to be we're going to keep putting it in your sewer. But anyway, the bottom line issue is we've looked at the issue and we've talked about injunction. The other option is we just close it up and let them go for the injunction, put them on notice, and they can go for an injunction. Gare?
Just real briefly, this has gone on for quite a while. When are we filing? Seems like, you know, we heard the paperwork is ready, we're done this, we prepared it.
I think,
Just received the letter, Gary, we just received the letter, Commissioner, last week, late last week, that they're not interested.
Right.
So we get the message in legal. We will file, we'll talk to our lawyers tomorrow, and we'll make sure that it gets done. But we just got the letter last week. We tried to give the new administration the benefit of the doubt that they needed time to be educated on the issue, and there was some hope with their overtures about meeting. You know how it works, and the chief of staff for the governor's office, the governor's lawyers were reaching out to us to discuss, but it is clear from the letter last week that they are not interested.
was that from the
It's from the
governor's office?
AG's office.
Well, the AG is representing DEEP.
Represents the state of Connecticut, right.
Well, they represent DEEP, but I would assume the final determination is in the governor's office. I thought that was still an issue with Bob Clark that he was dealing with.
Well, in the letter, the AG invited Bart, Attorney Halloran, to reach out to Bob Clark again, but
So he
that
still,
was the extent of it, yeah.
I think we've got to at least exhaust that issue and make that decision this week.
Chairman? Do you think it might be wise to, before we file any injunction or any legal action, to get the town managers in here and maybe explain it to them what's going on? Because I would imagine that a lot of them are not completely aware of it. They're aware to a certain extent, and I think it might be a good idea.
You know, Commissioner, we
been
just,
in.
on behalf of the Board of Finance, we did that the last time, and they're aware. But, you know, and, you know,
Send them an update before.
what they're aware of is you know, that they don't want it to come back on the towns. So, you know, I mean, and that's,
They were all notified. They all knew about it. And again, how many came and helped us with the letters of support?
Okay. We'll have to take some action. I think I want to talk to Bart tomorrow morning, or we'll have to discuss it with him, because he has had a call in and he's had discussions with
Right.
Bob, and I just want to find out if there's any light there, or if there isn't. If it's definitive, that's another issue.
That's
But
fine.
I don't think that letter came from the Attorney General. It came from the person that's handling it.
Well,
in the
it
Attorney
came from the
General's
AG's office, right.
Yeah. Okay, can we move on? Are you
Yes,
almost-
Excuse me, is that the end of? you-
Yeah, it's the end of my report.
I just
Sorry.
had, I had a question for you, though, Scott,
Buddy, go
before
ahead.
you. Is basically, is there any movement on, this is the third front that we have with the state of Connecticut, is the Glastonbury land acquisition deal,
Yeah, no, there is none. I did talk to the town manager, and as we met with him last month, council and myself, and they did commit that they would reach out to the OPM and the governor's office to see what support they could find for a funding source for the land. They did that. They sent the letter out in March 22nd, I believe, and they have yet to hear a response.
All right, thank you.
Further discussion, further questions? If not, item 8, report from the district council.
Very brief, just two things, if I may, Mr. Chairman. First of all, as you all know, we've been through quite a bit of ups and downs with our relationship with HCL and SAP on the computer upgrade and business transformation. We have, at various times over the past several months, shared with you some okay news and then some not-so-good news. Our staff, your staff, has gone through a Herculean effort in trying to get this project back on track and entered into a revised MOU with a revised scope of work back earlier this year. And I'm happy to report that the first two milestones, one which was March 8th, 2019, where the blueprint work was to be completed, was in fact met by HCL. Not alone, with our staff and with SAP's involvement. And the second milestone, which was just last Friday, March 29th, where the baseline configuration was completed, that was completed on time within the milestone date. So, and as these milestones are reached, payments are made, payments are not made absent them reaching the milestones. So to date, at least, they're on schedule with the revised agreement and MOU, so that's good news. Secondly, we have, as you know, we've retained a federal lobbyist for many years through the legal department. We had a federal lobbyist, JBS, consulting for a number of years. We then switched to Envision Strategies, who are presently under contract until the end of, we're under contract till the end of March. We've reached out to other firms, one of which is Squires, Patton and Boggs, which is an international lobbying firm based in Washington, D.C., in particular, former Congressman Bill Schuster and Congressman, I think it's Bill Crowley, if I'm not mistaken, Mr.
Joe
Chairman.
Crowley.
Joe Crowley, thank you, from New York, have joined that firm and have we've reached out to them, and we've reached a tentative agreement subject to taking this to the government committee and then on to the full board. But I think I sent to the commissioners information about Squires, Patton, Boggs, information about those two former congresspeople, and information about what that firm has done and can do for municipal utilities like the MDC. I will tell you that the fee that's proposed is the same as what was paid to Envision and to JBS Consulting. It's $150,000 per year. I've asked Steve Bonafonte to secure, and he has obtained information from the Federal Ethics Commission about what lobbyists charge, what their rates are for this type of work. I will tell you that this $150,000 is at the low range. The numbers that he came back with for other municipalities, municipal utilities of similar size and complexity of the MDC range from $160,000 a year up to $800,000 a year. So it's while it's not cheap, it's $150,000 is certainly within the range. But we'll take that to the government committee and then on to the full board come next May. We have enough in the legal budget to at least cover for a month, which we intend to do because we'd like to get them on board sooner rather than later. There was some discussion earlier about in the Clean Water Project. I think Commissioner Ione mentioned the federal monies, and there may not be as much on the sewer side, but there is money on the water side. And one of the things that we would look to our lobbyists to do is not only to help us develop relationships with the people in Washington, but also to look for pots of money that we can access for our infrastructure improvements. So,
Also pursuing
and I will tell you, if history is any teacher, the lobbyists we've retained to date have been very successful, whether through the ARA projects from several years ago or through looking at other pockets of money where they've secured federal money in the millions of dollars to assist the MDC in its infrastructure. So it's money well spent. But I want to give you an update. It was, I sent you some information. If anyone has any comments or questions about who we're suggesting be retained, please reach out to me and let me know. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just to Mr. Stone, does this new firm supplement what Mr. Bonafonte was doing, or vice versa?
Quite frankly, Steve is here in Hartford full-time. Steve does spend a lot of time in Washington, probably once a month. I think he travels to Washington. He is going to be the contact with this firm, but that firm is there in a fixture in Washington, D.C. And so they're able to be, Steve is more or less the liaison between us and them, and he's familiar with them, and we're going down this week, and we'll be meeting with them, and I'm sure we'll meet with them on a regular basis. But I wouldn't say that one replaces the other. They're really a team that work together, and Steve gives that local presence to what is necessary down in Washington. They do the opposite. They give us that presence in Washington to use up here.
Thank you.
Okay. Council's through. Item 9, Committee on Organization, consideration and possible action regarding. We're going to take these individually. A, appointment of District Treasurer, April 1st, 2019. Recommendation, receive the report and adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Not. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item B, appointment of Chief Operating Officer. Recommended action, receive a report and adopt a resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item C, appointment of Chief Administrative Officer, April 1st, 2019. Recommended action, receive, report, and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Not. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 10, Bureau of Public Works, consideration and possible action. A, acceptance of sewers built by developer permit agreement, March 13th, 2019. Recommended action, receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion?
Move it.
Moved.
Been moved and seconded. There was a recommendation from the Board of Public Works. Okay, I believe it was a unanimous recommendation. I don't know who was chair. Yeah.
Vice chair, we don't have a vice chair, I don't think.
It was a unanimous recommendation. Discussion? Not. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 10B, Shepherd Drive encroachment agreement, March 13th, 2019. Recommend move adoption. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Water Bureau, item number 11, Water Bureau consideration and possible action. A and B, A, Cherry Brook Transmission Main, March 13th, 2019. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. There's a unanimous position from the Water Bureau. Discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item B, this is a contentious Appointment of Commissioner Buell to the Hogback Commission, March 13th, 2019. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Quickly, yes.
Remember who made those motions?
Moved. It's been moved. Is there a second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that was. Item 12, recommended reports and motions for adoption. Referral of procurement ratification ordinances to Committee on MDC Government.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Not all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Item 13, personnel, pension, and insurance consideration and possible action regarding workers' compensation settlement. Is there a need for executive session?
It's been approved by the PPI committee unanimously, Mr. Chairman. Unless we get into some specifics about the employee, we can do that in open session.
Okay. Discussion. Is there a motion? I think.
Move the resolution.
Second it.
Discussion. If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 14, opportunity for general public comments.
Good evening. My name is Dave Silverstone, the Independent Consumer Advocate. Just real quick, I was requested by several consumers to hold another consumer meeting, but during the afternoon. Remember last year's was in the evening. So I'm holding that, just FYI, May 2nd, 2 p.m., West Hartford Town Hall. You're all invited. Thank you.
Okay, further comment or further questions? Commissioners, questions and comments? Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have three things I wanted to bring up. The first is really easy, and it might be taken care of. On the Learn to Earn program, which we had a copy of the correspondence, I thought I saw the letter had gone to the chief executive officers of the towns. I saw for East Hartford, for instance, Marcia LeClaire was sent to her. And I just thinking it should have probably gone to the superintendent of schools or the, particularly the head of guidance at the high schools. In terms of, I mean, who's got contact with kids, that they've got it. So if it hasn't gone there, I actually forwarded it myself, but just as a general rule. A second thing, we talked about this, Scott, about, I would like, hopefully by the next meeting, I'd like to see a schedule of when our budget deliberations are going to proceed. And as I hope, and I don't know whether the other commissioners how they feel about this, but I'm looking for a little bit more time to go over the budget next year, perhaps a couple of meetings, and with a section-by-section review of the budget, so we can look at it and say, okay, what's going on here, here's the increases, here's why. Not necessarily, I'm not looking for a line-by-line kind of thing, and it may not take that long, but I think last year, it was my first year, so I don't know what's gone on in previous years, and I think you'd indicated in previous years there had been more of a comprehensive review, let's say it that way, of the budget. So that's, so I would like
that generally takes place in the Board of Finance, where we do have.
I know that, Mr. Commissioner, but I think.
I'm not saying we don't go through that as a normal process on the board, too.
Yeah, I'd like to see, because since I'm not on the Board of Finance, and I think we're all going to vote on it, and it's all going to have implications for our communities, I thought that it would be, good practice to do that, in a small d kind of way.
Yeah. I don't think the Board of Finance commissioners can attend those meetings, too, to participate.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we should all be able to do that.
No, I'm
as
just
commissioners.
saying that Bud, you allow, all commissioners can sit on the Board of Finance.
We have, and we've actually accepted questions from folks.
Right.
They just don't vote on it, but it's a subcommittee that goes into a level of detail that's greater than
Yeah.
what comes to the committee on the whole, of
Yeah.
the commission. or something.
We will present.
We'll present it both ways.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And the last point,
All I was making, the point is, everybody has the right to go to the Board of Finance. They do go into far more detail relative to that dealing, because they go down into the bowels of the budget, so.
But if you give us the schedule of the systematic.
Commissioner will do it,
This
yeah.
department, that department,
Yeah.
timing, others can attend if they have to take interest.
Sure. We will absolutely do that, and I offered that last year, so, last budget season, so
and
we will
there's
do
been,
that.
obviously, there's been some changes in the people who are putting together the budget, and there were maybe some issues last year that hopefully will not be there this year.
Yes.
And the third point is, first of all, I want to thank West Hartford Community Television for broadcasting this program. And it dawns on me, we had this discussion, all these things tonight, we're talking about, asking the public is not aware of it, and legislators and pressure on asking legislators to help us, and kind of like this whole communication with the outside world. And it would be really, I think, productive if somehow, and I don't know technically how it could happen or if it could happen, but if the West Hartford Community Television could share this with the other community television.
It is.
It is.
They do. So this is on East Hartford Community Television?
Nick, Wisnick.
It is broadcast?
Yes, we do share, West Hartford actually shares this with all of our towns.
Oh, it was a great idea for whoever thought of that in the past. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions and comments, buddy? And then Denise.
Just quickly, Mr. Chairman, I want to wish the very best of luck to the three people who the resolutions were about tonight, and to work with them in the future. If you had a chance to meet them, I suggest that you do get a chance to talk to them and meet them. I think we have some very, good people in there, and I'm glad that we finally got Scott some help, because he's been doing all these jobs, a little bit anyways, all this time. So Scott, congratulations. It doesn't mean you're going on vacation, but you may be able to breathe a little bit easier. So good luck, and good luck to all of you, too.
Thank you.
Denise?
Just wanted to follow up on, so West Hartford Community TV does provide it to all the other towns, but it is up to those other towns to display it on their site. So I would encourage everybody to go back and look at their town website and see if it's up there, displayed in a prominent place. Also want to thank Nick for his help, and if you haven't noticed, it's also on MDC's front page now. So it's very easy to just send that link to anyone you think is interested, and it's really easy to find the meetings now. So thank you.
Hartford Public Access gets that too, right? Okay.
Further comments? If not, the appropriate motions and, without exception, we stand adjourned.
Free at last.